At a time when tensions were already high between northern and southern states, the result of decades of growing political, economic, and cultural division, news from Harper's Ferry, Virginia sent a shockwave through the South. A small group of radical abolitionists, led by John Brown, raided the United States Armory and Arsenal, intending to arm slaves for a revolt against their masters. Federal troops quelled Brown's attempt. Among the captives was a free man of color from Raleigh. His final words before his execution inflamed the passions of abolitionists.
If I am dying for freedom, I could not die for a better cause. I had rather die than be a slave.
But it was the news that the raid was backed by wealthy white northern anti-slavery activists that sent fear through the southern states. In North Carolina and across the South, militia companies formed to prepare for battle, anticipating that more uprisings would surely be in store. The slavery question had driven a political wedge between North and South. Southerners saw the anti-slavery movement, supported by many Northern congressmen, as yet another form of oppression and an attack on their state sovereignty. In North Carolina, the fear inspired by John Brown's raid turned to anger, and for some, anger turned to radical agitation to secede from the Union.
When the Union ceases to be voluntary, it degenerates into a hideous oppression.
The whole Southern mind is inflamed to the highest pitch, and the leaders in the disunion move are scorning every suggestion of compromise.
Anti-union sentiment blazed across the state, but most white North Carolinians did not want to secede. They were proud of their country and the fact that North Carolina was one of the original 13 colonies that fought for and won independence. But a test was coming: loyalty to country first or to North Carolina. The presidential election of 1860 turned the secession rhetoric white hot. Most Southerners believed the candidate of the new Republican Party, Abraham Lincoln, intended to end slavery in the United States. They believed such an act would violate their federal constitutional rights. Some Southern states threatened to secede if Lincoln was elected. In North Carolina, where the Republican Party did not exist, Lincoln's name was not on the ballot. But Lincoln won the national election. 6 Southern states quickly seceded. North Carolina was in turmoil. Though not a large slaveholding state, North Carolina was deeply tied to other Southern states through family, business, and political connections. Some citizens were ready to prepare for war or cross state lines to join the new Confederacy. But Governor John Ellis, who favored secession, called for more cautious action.
We must watch and wait.
Most North Carolinians agreed, but some legislators called for a secession convention. The call died for lack of support. Then, in February 1861, still hoping for a solution, the legislature sent delegates to a peace conference in Washington, D.C., a desperate final effort by states that had not yet seceded to avert a civil war. Meanwhile, amid growing tensions, a small contingent of federal troops took refuge at Fort Sumter, South Carolina, in Charleston Harbor, and refused to leave, infuriating Southerners who believed that with secession, the fort had become South Carolina property. Confederates prepared for battle. Some congressmen tried to negotiate a settlement, but failed. The standoff continued for months without compromise. In April, the Federals launched a fleet to reinforce the troops at Fort Sumter. On April 12, 1861, the Confederates opened fire. Immediately following the attack, President Lincoln called for a blockade of all southern ports. The action seemed to confirm the fears of North Carolinians that the federal government intended to subjugate the South. Just days later, Simon Cameron, the United States Secretary of War, wired Governor Ellis calling for about 2,000 men to help put down the secessionists. The governor replied,
You can get no troops from North Carolina.
Governor Ellis published a proclamation summoning the North Carolina legislature into special session. Gathered in Raleigh, the delegates agreed Lincoln's call for troops was the final straw. They would not muster troops to fight against the South, and they would not allow federal troops to pass through North Carolina to make war on fellow Southerners. They believed they had to make their stand against the federal government. On May 20th, 1861, the delegates voted to secede from the Union, join the Confederacy, and go to war.
I think the South is committing suicide, but my lot is cast, and I will go down with my companions.
We must show to the world that North Carolina will maintain her rights at all hazards.